Hello, Kyle here. I recently got a full spectrum converted camera for infrared photography, and I'm trying to get an idea for what kind of exposure settings to expect in different situations. I've already learned that the common advice that 850 and 950 nanometer filters require a tripod is wrong. I've also been warned that IR video is impractical, and that's also wrong. Handheld infrared shooting is no problem at all on a modern converted camera. Imaging sensors are more than capable of capturing enough light for great looking video in infrared. So how about the advice that infrared photography needs full bright sunlight to be effective? Let's see what a cloudy, overcast day looks like. So I went to the park on 2 separate days and conducted some very crude tests, recording video with each of my infrared filters. I used exposure compensation to avoid blown highlights and too many shadows. Instead of looking at the exposure meter on the camera, I was looking at the histogram. Full spectrum really makes the fall colors look flat and washed out. On an overcast day, it takes about 3 1/3 to 3 2/3 more stops of light to get the same exposure as I would get on a sunny day. And the end result is just a blown out sky that makes it look like it was shot on a cell phone. Shooting in a bright sunny day in full spectrum gives an image with washed out foliage, but the sky is almost a cartoonishly bright blue. 680 nanometers is where I've seen the biggest difference between lighting conditions. On an overcast day, it takes 3 stops more light, and it creates this very dreamlike pink sky with cool greenish white foliage. Bright sunlight creates an almost alien-looking red sky with foliage that has a bit of variation in color. This was the only setting where my Z5 couldn't create a custom white balance setting. I ended up just using the full spectrum setting since it gave the coolest looking result. 720 nanometers is what I think of as the standard infrared look. Both overcast and sunny shooting conditions gave a very similar overall look, but overcast feels more soft and surreal and dreamlike, while sunny looks like that classic contrasty, punchy infrared. It takes 2 stops more light on an overcast day. With this setting, the sky takes on a warm brownish tone and the foliage takes on a cool bluish tone. You can swap these channels in post for a more natural look if you want. 850 nanometers leaves no color in the image. It's all black and white here. Exposure was the same for both overcast and sunny, but overcast looks really flat and washed out, and sunny gives me that great, bold, dark sky. 950 nanometers has me back to needing 3 stops of more light to get the same exposure on an overcast day that I could get in the sun. This filter gives me shots with very little contrast. I think I might have to limit this filter to high noon on the sunniest of days. I'm just not getting much with this. So, a couple of observations. Taking full spectrum as the baseline, putting a 680 nanometer filter takes about half a stop more light than full spectrum. 720 nanometer filter takes about 1 stop more light than full spectrum. 850 needs 2 stops, and 950 nanometers needs a whopping 7 stops more light. In camera, when I'm shooting full spectrum, the histogram looks like a big U shape where I get tons of buried shadows and tons of blown highlights and not much in the middle. As I go deeper into infrared, the histogram sort of flattens out. It stops being a U and slowly develops a bigger hump in the middle. 680 and 720 both give me some great, nice data to work with. At 850, the histogram is really starting to turn into like a triangle with a peak in the center, and it's starting to narrow in a little bit. I don't get the full range from darkest darks to lightest lights. And by the time I get to 950 nanometers, that histogram bump is only taking up a quarter of the entire space. I'm not getting much tonal data to work with at all here. The coatings they use to reduce lens flare in visible light aren't nearly as effective at stopping flare in infrared. And the deeper into infrared you go, the worse the flare is going to be. All right, here's some random footage. All right, thanks.